February 25th should have been a great day for Madeline Soto, her 13th birthday party, celebrating a new phase in her life, becoming a teenager. But it wasn't a great day. It was her last day. Madeline was reported missing the following day, and 4 days later, her body was found 22 miles from home off the side of the road in some brush. So what happened to this little girl? What was her life like? Madeline was living with her mom, Jen Soto. Jen had a boyfriend who had been in her life for about 6 years. His name is Stephan Sterns. Stephan is currently locked up. Police found disturbing images on his phone, resulting in 20 counts of child sex abuse-related charges and 40 charges involving hundreds of images and videos of that abuse. Jen refers to Stephan as Madeline's stepfather, although they were never married. Stephan is the prime suspect in Madeline's death and the last person known to be with her. Jen Soto has not made any public statements since her daughter's body was found and has not been named as a suspect. Right now, the murder investigation continues, and tonight we will take a closer look at Madeline's family dynamics. Where is her father, and how much of a role did he play in her life? Then we'll take a much closer look at the photographs, including this one of Madeline's 13th birthday. Who is that in the reflection in the glass? Who was at that party? We're looking for answers as we continue to investigate the tragic life and death of Madeline Soto.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Great to have you aboard on this Friday night as we continue to cover the story of Madeline Soto, who was just a little girl. We have to remember that through all of this. This is just a little girl. And any of you who have raised little girls, or maybe you were a little girl years ago, think about her life and what she went through, what she had to deal with at such a young age. 13 years. That's it. Then she's gone. But what she went through and suffered in the years building up to that, unimaginable. Now, when I think of this little girl, you have to think about when you're a child, you know, your world is a little smaller, right? When you get older, the world gets bigger. You meet more people, you go more places. But when you're a child, your world is small. It's your group of friends. It's the kids in your class, and obviously it's the people in your home. So what exactly was Stephan Sterns' role? Was he actually the so-called stepfather? Now, it's clear from the allegations that he didn't act the way a stepfather should, but is that the role that he was playing or portraying inside that household? Did she look to him as a stepfather, father figure? Did he have some level of authority and control over her? Right? Children live in houses, there are rules, and we know that the parents are in charge, right? The parents are in charge and the kids follow the rules, and you know, you don't want to get in trouble, you have to get permission, all things like that. Are these the things that Stephan Sterns, did he have that level of power and control in that household? Was he really her stepfather? Was this a family? Was this a functional family? Okay, well, put aside, and it's difficult too, and what is alleged to have happened here, but the rest of their lives, were they functioning as like mom, dad, child? Because in most households with a mom, dad, and a child, mom and dad make decisions about what's best for the child. They take family vacations. Sometimes dad is doing things with child, sometimes mom, sometimes everybody together. Family dinners, You know, all things like that. Did you clean your room, right? Are these things happening? And are they functioning as a family? Despite the fact that they didn't get married. I don't think they got married. Maybe they did, and maybe they secretly got married. I don't know. I haven't heard that. But was this really like back to school night? Does he go to back to school night? Does he know the teachers? Was he one of the emergency numbers that they would call and you would put it down? Oh, if you can't get through to mom, get through to Stephan. Is that the way this family was functioning? And then another question, well, what about dad though? Like her actual dad? What was his role in their life, in her life? How much time did they spend together? How was that relationship? Because the one thing I think we know, based on the allegations, if they're true, and investigators say they're documented on a phone, so that seems to be relatively strong evidence, reliable evidence. Would she have a relationship with her father where she could trust him to tell him things? I mean, you know, maybe you're in the house, mom's there, and you know, mom's living with Stephan, the accused abuser, in all of this, so maybe there's some fear about that. Did she have the type of relationship with her father that maybe she could tell him, or was she intimidated not to do so? And what are the dynamics between her mother and her father? Like, did everyone get along? Did they know each other? Did they ever do things together? How was all this working, and how did that affect Madeline, and how would that affect her ability to speak out, her ability to try to find someone for help? Because she was suffering. She was suffering through this abuse. So let's try to lay out this family, Madeline's family, right? So we begin Jennifer Soto and Tyler Wallace together. They have a child. They conceive a child, and that child is Madeline. Madeline is born on February 22nd, 2011. Okay, so we go back to 2011. What a cute baby. What a cute baby, right? So there's dad, there's mom. Now, Tyler Wallace marries Tatiana Wallace in April of 2011, the same year. So a couple of months after his daughter is born from Jennifer, he marries Tatiana. So what happened? What was going on here? What are the circumstances of Madeline's birth in all of this? And then at some point, Jennifer Soto, we think it's about 6 years ago, begins dating Stephan Sterns. And he now enters the picture. So you see Madeline's in the middle. And what was going on here? You know, it's tough. It's tough being when mom and dad aren't together, but from the time she's born, dad's with someone else and mom brings someone else in. So that's perhaps her norm. But let's bring in our guests and start working through some of all of this. Joining us tonight in Orlando, Florida, Osceola News-Gazette reporter Ken Jackson is with us. In New York, clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher, and expert on violent crime, and the author of the book, The New Evil, Dr. Gary Brucato is back with us. And in Jacksonville, Alabama, forensic death investigator, host of the Body Bags podcast, and professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Welcome to everyone. Before we get into the family dynamics and everything, Ken, I wanted to go to you on the latest news tonight in terms of what's happening in the case involving Stephan Sterns, because he has been charged facing, what, 60 counts?
Right. Thanks for having me on, Vinny, to close out the week. Yeah. So this week, the state attorney's office levied 60 charges, among them sexual abuse on a child under 12, sexual abuse on a child between 12 and 18, lewd and lascivious molestation, and then 40 counts of basically possessing child porn with the act of a child. So court dates were set this week. First of all, he was scheduled for an arraignment on April 2nd. I'm going to be using terms that you'll be familiar with from your time in the courtroom. It was set for the morning of April 2nd, which is a Thursday. Sometime today, this morning, this afternoon, that appearance was waived. Now, when he was first arrested back on February, the last week of February, he refused an initial court appearance. And then for the reading of the charges, he did not appear in court either. His public defender appeared in his stead. So Stephan Sterns has yet to appear in court, and it appears that he's trying to avoid this at all costs to make an appearance. Now, court dates have been set. His trial has been set to start for the week of the May 13th docket, with a pretrial hearing set for April 24th. Now, you and I know that in many cases like this, especially with something with an expansive amount of evidence, many times defense attorneys will ask for a continuance. Put it down a couple months down the line. There have been more than one people have said that. In fact, Belvin Perry, who was the judge in a case you're very familiar with back in Orlando here about a decade ago, said much the same thing. They may ask for a continuance to delay the trial in order to, build a defense.
Yeah, you're going to have to build that from scratch. Just a tough case.
Exactly. And the other thing is these may just be dates on a website, since we still don't have murder charges in the case. And I think once murder charges are filed, I think all this is going to go up in the air.
Absolutely. I agree 1,000%. Dr. Gary Brucato, I want to pick up on something Ken just said. This guy doesn't want to be seen in public. What does that tell you about Stephan Sterns? He doesn't show up for his arraignments. Wait, I don't want to be seen. Don't put me in. He knows in Florida there's cameras in every courtroom.
Well, it's impossible to say precisely what it means, but I think that we have to begin to envision that this offender, if he is guilty, is a lot like a lot of other people who engage in pedophilic acts, a rather interpersonally odd, detached, fantasy-oriented kind of an individual. But at the same time, what we see here are interesting elements of the groomer type of offender, who tends to be a little bit more interpersonally adept and clever. The whole point of a groomer is that you use your relationship skills to lure the victim, as opposed to a more odd person who just snatches somebody in a car or something like that. But I think that what you're getting is a sense of a person who's just not very adept interpersonally, which is probably why he engages in a relationship with a child. I wouldn't expect this person to be particularly good at having adult, normal relationships.
And one follow-up on all this, Dr. Gary Brucato, for Madeline Soto, understanding this family tree, that her father marries someone who's not her mother right around the time she's born, so stepmom is in her life, presumably her entire life. What's it like for that child? And if that child is being abused, what are your thoughts about the child coming forward or not coming forward to either parent about what's happening?
Well, first of all, I will say that I think one of the things that makes this type of figure so particularly diabolical in the public's eye is that you're talking about an offender who probably took advantage of the fact that this child was missing a certain kind of a figure in her life, which creates a vulnerability where you can come in and be a dad figure, spend time with the person, engage in creating a kind of a confidence. And it's a way of sort of taking a kid who might be feeling kind of abandoned or dropped and suddenly making them feel special. And that is taken advantage of by this type of offender to groom a child and then engage in increasingly perverse contact. What I think is you probably had a child who, where the offenses were so normalized over time that she perhaps didn't realize that some of these things were outrageous, or engaged in this kind of relationship thinking that it connected her to this outrageous person. And that's why it is very interesting to think about why the child would have to be eliminated at 13. It makes you wonder if it's that she was getting to an age where she was realizing that what was happening was wrong, or could talk about it, or perhaps had aged out of the age range that this offender was attracted to. But it's unclear what that's about. But I think we have to understand the dynamics of abuse, and that there's a mixture of fear and being confused that this person loves you.
I want to put up on the screen a social media post. This is from 2012 to give you an idea, again, about the family dynamics and the family that Madeline Soto was a part of. On February 4th, 2012, Tyler Wallace, her dad, posts a picture of Madeline on Facebook, and his mother, Donna Wallace, writes, "I am meeting my precious grandbaby in less than 2 weeks." And I don't know if grandma lives out of town or whatever, but it seems like she was going to be there with the grandbaby for birthday number 1. Another interesting note, we haven't heard much from Dad, and I can imagine this has got to be tearing him apart, but there he is with Tatiana, his wife. And DailyMail.com reported this on March 2nd, a quote from Tatiana, who is the stepmom. There she is. "My stepdaughter Madeline has been missing for more than 72 hours. With Stephan Sterns behind bars, we can concentrate on finding her. Share her photo with everyone you know." That was Tatiana Wallace, who was the stepmom, who was stepping in. Joseph Scott Morgan, looking at the world that this little girl was in, it is incredibly sad and tragic to think that she got stuck in that house with this man, Stephan Sterns. And I'm wondering what his role was in that house, if they were functioning like a family and he had that sort of, you know, parental power that we have with our children.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think for me, one of the things that comes up here is this idea that he is documenting all of this. There's one date that sticks out in my mind in this, and I think that there is a date that goes back on, I think, this affidavit that was filed with some of this imagery that goes back to 2019. And you can do the arithmetic there and get an idea that she would have been about 8 years old. Just let that settle down into your groundwater there for a moment, moving forward. And you think about how long this has been going on, and Dr. Gary had made a very salient point about the normalization of this activity that's been going on, and he has documented it all along. And I got to tell you that for the prosecution, this is a gold mine, what they're talking about here, because you're talking about being able to have all of these benchmarks along the way, methodically documented within that household, moving forward. And it's going to be one whale of the case that the prosecution is going to have on their hand. It's going to be a mountain of evidence is what it's come down to. And my friend, we haven't even talked about, you know, what the medical examiner is going to conclude at this point, because we don't know.
Yeah, with that hasn't been concluded yet, and we're waiting to hear manner, cause, and any other details that may come out. Ken Jackson, let me ask you about these family dynamics. What have you uncovered about Dad and stepmom, Jen Soto? Any word on where she is? I know she's kind of been out of sight for a while here.
I tell you, she's playing the great role of prisoner of war. We have not heard from her. What I had heard last week was that I heard second or third hand that she had lawyered up. You know, when we go back through social media, you see references to Stephan going back to about 2018. And the scary part about this is that the charges, the forensic evidence that Kissimmee police have put together is that that a lot of the cases in the charges likely occurred starting in June of 2019. That's less than a year or so from 2018. So what scares me as the parent of a teenage daughter is that, you know, how long did it take for Jen Soto, mom, to enter into the relationship with Stephan Sterns, the boyfriend / stepdad? I have a hard time calling him stepdad in everything that I've read. Before all this started to happen, that's that's the chilling thing, where when we get the investigation from KPD, hopefully soon, it will answer those questions. And we've got a lot of questions and a lot of dots to connect and a lot of the T's to cross when that investigation comes out.
Dr. Gary Brucato, what do you think of that timeline of the relationship of Jen and Stephan Sterns, like 2018, and then the first allegation here, based upon what they found on the phone, the digital images, is in June of 2019? Like that, would that be quick in your mind, going from, you know, getting into mom's life and then doing what he's alleged to have done to her daughter?
Not at all. In fact, offenders that I've spoken to have told me that sometimes they choose to marry a woman because they have spied the child that the woman has. You remember, for example, that occurs in the Nabokov book Lolita, where he chooses to marry a woman because she has the underage daughter that he's attracted to, grooms her, and then winds up in a relationship with her. And so the idea would be to become involved, and then there's a period of some months to a year, so forth, et cetera, depending upon the case, where you groom the child, break down boundaries, you know, and normalize things. One very important elephant in the room here that I haven't heard anybody else talk about is that a person who engages in pedophilic behaviors like this does not start doing that in their 30s. Chances are what is eventually going to happen, if he's guilty of this, is we're probably going to determine that this was not his first experimentation with this. Usually these kinds of offenders have scores of victims. Sometimes they've even worked jobs that have put them in contact with children so they can experiment with touching children, finding ways to earn their confidence. For example, I had heard some idea that he potentially worked at Disney World. And this is very interesting because it would place a person easily in contact with children, particularly if you're wearing a costume. We all know the story of John Wayne Gacy dressing up as a clown so that children would touch him. So that this becomes a way of breaking down boundaries and gaining confidence of children. And I think when we look at that age, we have to be very, very concerned that there probably were priors. And then, of course, it raises the question, if he turns out to be involved in the murder, is this the first time that that has happened? I would say that I would not be surprised on either count.